So testing. All right, so let's see how we're gonna roll with this. So now you'll see any questions there.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you very much to come along for part 4 of our little reef keeping Q&A chat. If you look on our Facebook page or on Google, YouTube, same thing these days, then you can find the previous chats just by looking under Reef Aquarium Q&A. And I've got a whole bunch of cheat notes for you this time. So what my plan is today is to do a quick little roundup of part 1, 2, 3 and 3.2. So there's basically, this is the final chapter. So the other thing is I'm going to make all of my notes available. So if you shoot me an email to paul@majesticaquariums.com.au and ask for the Reef Aquarium training links, which is this. So here's all the notes. So basically what this is going to do is have, hang on, let's get in tune. Yep. So it'll have the why is it doing that? It's going to have the heading, and then I've put a few videos from my YouTube channel of what I'd suggest you watch on that particular topic. So just in case you're not familiar, here's my YouTube channel, which is Majestic Aquariums TV. And if you go to the channel, Majestic Aquariums TV, and in the search bar, you can write anything you want, and it will come up with videos on that particular subject. For example, if you wanted to learn about shark sex and you're in business, it's got the playlists that you can look at, and you can go through on any particular subject that you might want to learn about. We've grouped all the videos for you to check out. So, can everyone hear me okay? Hopefully they can. So once again, hit us up with as many questions as possible, because we have Miss Lovely Rebel standing by to watch the questions, because I'm likely to get very distracted and talk away. So, well, I can see our very question there from Jessie. What is the best way to keep a white-tip reef shark? Well, I think that one is basically its own seminar, but while I'm at it, I may as well just show you my white-tip reef shark. But basically a white-tip reef shark is a very, very, very easy animal to keep, assuming that you have a tank big enough for it. So if you have like a 20,000 litre fish tank, just like I just happen to, then a white-tip reef shark is an awesome choice. There's mine sitting down there. And the white-tip reef shark, there's one there and there's one there. The white-tip reef shark is a much better aquarium shark than the black-tip, because the black-tip has to swim all the time, whereas the white-tip will spend most of its day actually just sitting on the bottom. So therefore, it's probably not as important that the tank is as big. But because they still grow to be a large animal, I'd still be looking at 20,000 litres in order to have the animal. So once again, it is meant to be a reef keeping video, not a reef shark keeping video, but maybe we should do that.
I'd still be looking at.
Just turn that down. It's a very nice voice you've got going there. Okay, so once again, the plan for the seminar is you guys can distract me with as many questions as possible, but my plan A is do a really quick recap, and plan B is to go from bottom up on my little list of notes, and then hopefully last about an hour or so. But if I'm aiming for an hour, knowing me, that'll be 2 hours. So quick recap. So first thing is Reef Aquarium training links. If you email me, paul@majesticaquariums.com.au, I will send you these notes, and I promise you they're very, very valuable, because if you have the patience to sit down and watch these links, I promise you that you'll pretty much have everything that you need to know to successfully run a reef tank. Now, keeping a reef tank is very, very easy, depending what you keep in the reef tank. And that's something that is becoming very underrated these days. So obviously my lights are off, but in the old days, corals were hard to keep. Then we went through a phase where corals were basically quite easy to keep. But one of the reasons why corals were quite easy to keep is we were very selective of what we kept. Now we're way too confident with what we're keeping. And even beginners go and buy corals that they really shouldn't be buying. So for example, if you're going to keep leather corals, recordias, zonanthus, corellas, these corals are very easy to keep. And if you're a beginner, that's what you should be keeping. If you're very experienced, you can then start moving into your euphyllias and your harder to keep corals. And if you're very, very experienced, you can then start moving into things like your acroporas, your SPSs. So here at Majestic Aquariums, we rate all of our corals as what's called 1, 2, 3s. A number 1 coral is a coral that's very easy to keep. A number 2 coral is a coral that it might die. You might do everything right, and it may actually die. A number 3 coral means it's probably going to die. So what that does is just give you a little bit of power when you're purchasing the coral to decide what you want to keep. And that's something that I believe lately has been lost, because with all the fancy lights and the fancy equipment, people seem to think that if they buy all the fancy stuff, that means they can keep SPS. That means they can keep torch coral. That means they can keep whatever they want. But that really isn't the case, because at the end of the day, it's you that keeps the corals, not your fancy gear. A hammer, most Euphyllia species, I will put in the number 2 category, because they are not that hard to keep, but they're definitely not a number 1. They're nothing like a leather coral or a corella or a zonanthus or anything that I consider to be extremely easy to keep. So make sure you yell out when you get questions, Rebel, because I will get very distracted and I will go off in my own little world. Now, yes, oi. Okay, so let's go back to this. Okay, so once again, I'm happy to email this to you. First thing that the email that we'll get, if you ask for it, is the videos, the DVDs that I've done in the past on reef keeping, so I definitely have a watch of them. The next thing you'll get is the 8-point principles seminar. And this 8-point principles seminar basically breaks everything you need to know about a reef aquarium into 8 points. If you follow these 8 points, you'll find that you'll generally be successful, and you'll find that if you are not successful, you can review the 8 points, and the point that you don't know or don't do or don't understand is your problem. We had a chat about your aquarium being a piece of furniture versus a hobby. If you're going to go for a saltwater aquarium, you need to know this is a hobby. This is not a piece of furniture. This is not something that you set up and you get someone else to look after. That does not work. You've got to be involved. You've got to want to do your own tests. You've got to want to learn. If you don't do that, get yourself a cichlid tank. We talked about comparing apples with apples. For example, one thing that really frustrates me is that people come into me and they ask for a quote for a reef aquarium, for example. I go and deck them out with all the good stuff. Then all of a sudden, they go, oh, your quote was too expensive. And then I go and see their tank, and it would make quite a good cichlid tank, but it is absolutely not set up to be a saltwater aquarium. So if you're thinking about getting into the hobby, it's really important to understand the quote that you're going to go with. because you've got to compare apples with apples. At the end of the day, if you get yourself a cheap tank, you just got yourself a cheap tank. And I promise you, if you save $1 setting up your tank, you're going to spend $10 on failure and dishearten. The next thing we talked about is, any money you save setting up the tank, you're going to spend on livestock.
Got a question? Livestock question?
Question, yep, go for it.
If I wanted to get a tank focusing on corals and a couple of fish, what size tank would you recommend?
Okay, so this is the really easiest question in the world. What size tank would I recommend? The biggest tank possible, because I've been selling aquariums for 24 years and every single day I'm involved in, should I get the small tank or should I get the big tank? And no one ever comes back and says, oh, I wish I got the small tank. Everyone wishes it was bigger, because what you want to do with the aquarium now is not what you want to do with it in the future, because you go through phases. Some people are like, oh, I just want to get corals and a few fish. If I had $1 for every person that told me that, I could buy something cool. But that's the way everyone says they start out. But then they get their corals, they get a few fish, they get a bit of confidence. Next thing you know, they're buying more fish, they're buying more corals, and next thing you know, what they set out is absolutely not what they've set up for. Because you always go past I'm just going to get a few corals and a few fish. That's how you start. It's never ever how you end. So just get the biggest tank that you possibly can. That's my absolute advice there.
Question?
Yep.
Jess has asked, is the Apex Neptune system regulating, would you use that for ease?
Okay, so would you use an Apex Neptune system? It depends what sort of person you are. If you're a person that loves tech, loves fancy things, that loves to read manuals.
Gadgets.
If you're a gadget dude, go for it. Absolutely, there is some advantages having it. But if you're the sort of person that's going to look at the manual and you just couldn't be bothered working it all out, it's not going to keep the tank for you. So it really just depends on the type of person you are. Because a lot of people get that stuff and they don't look after it properly, and they think that buying that is any substitute for looking after the tank. It is absolutely and totally not. So if you're a gadget dude, go for it. If you're not a gadget dude, don't buy it. Otherwise, someone will set it up for you. You won't ever really know how to use it, and it won't give you any benefit. It'll just give you a whole lot of increased confidence for no increased value.
Just said your eyes look beautiful.
Thank you. Feel free to hit me up with abuse or compliments.
Maybe she meant me.
Okay, I'm going to assume. I think it's a boy anyway.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, all right. Well, I think Rebel's eyes look beautiful, but I'll take that anyway.
All right, go on.
All right. See how easily we're distracted? See those eyes? They're very distracting, aren't they?
Yeah,
Look at that.
come on.
Okay, so now where'd we get up to? So feel free to hit up with questions when
He said not Luke.
you feel like it.
Oh, who's your favourite employee? And you can't.
Rebel.
I win.
Easy.
And David
Easy.
Frank said not Luke.
Next. Okay, now aquarium position is what we talked about. The aquarium position is really, really simple. The aquarium has to be where you are. Don't put it in the hallway. Don't put it in the spare room. Don't put it anywhere that you're not spending your time.
Yeah, okay.
Don't put it in the office that you mean to go to, but you're never in your office. You don't put it in the gaming room, but you're never in the game room. You got to put the fish tank where you are. The fish tank's got to be part of the family. So therefore, in the proximity to the television's a good thing, and you want it where all the action is. A shape of the aquarium, the longer the better. But basically 6'10" is an awesome height, and 7'62" is the maximum height. If you go above that, my belief is it's awesome as long as it's somebody else's, because the tall tanks are a pain in the neck. The other thing you want to look at is your armpit. For example, if you can just walk up and just reach in, that's awesome. Because then if there's something that needs adjusting in the fish tank, guess what? You'll just do it. But if you've got to get a bloody ladder, and you've got to go get the ladder and put the ladder there, and then you've got to open up the hood, and then you've got to open up the lids, and then by the time you've even thought about it, you've gone and done something else, and the fallen over coral stays fallen over, and next thing you know, it's dead. So what you want to try to do is, if you're a tall dude, then you can have a taller tank. If you're a short dude, you want a shorter tank. For example, this tank, that's good for Adrian. This tank, this one's good for Callan. Tall people can have tall tanks, short, and we even leave the footstool there for Adrian too, just in case he needs to get up there. There you go, mate. He's only little anyway, what's he going to do to me? Okay. So, if you go, and the width of the tank, so longer the better. The height, you want to just consider your armpit, and you also want to go at least as wide as it is high. So if you're going 6'10" high, go at least 6'10" wide. Wider the better, but once again, not out of arm's reach. If your tank's double-sided, 3 foot wide's great, but if you're not, if it's not double-sided, 3 foot wide's awesome, but once again, you're doing everything with tongs. So it's really easy to keep everything in arm's reach.
All right. You don't want to know some of these messages, but that's all right. Okay, so a couple of quick questions. What's your favourite reef tank? Jess wants to know.
Oh, what's my favourite reef tank?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Right now, I think this one.
There's lots of comments on length and width and girth.
Length and, yeah, okay, well, we'll stay away from that. Okay, this tank is asleep. But if you check this tank out in the daytime, I absolutely love it. So right now, this is my favourite tank. This is Luke's tank. And it looks really good in the day.
I think they more mean size, not necessarily.
Well, I'm just going to answer it any way I want.
Okay.
And right now, that's my favourite tank. That one's been my favourite tank. So Adrian's like the little bear. That's Adrian's tank. Luke's a bit bigger, like double his size. And that's Luke's tank. And then Callan's about double Luke, and that's his size. That's his. So I like Callan's the best. A few reasons why is because it looks better, and also Callan's bigger. So if I'm going to upset anyone, I'd much rather upset the little kids rather not upset Callan because he's big. So okay, now lighting. So the lighting is a really interesting question as well. Many people these days overlight their tanks because the lights these days are so damn fancy and they're so damn powerful. And then you go and check the settings and people run them nowhere near 100%. So they go and spend a fortune on these lights and then they turn them down. So the question with the lights is you either need to get corals that suit the lights that you've got, or you need to get lights that suit the corals that you want. For example, things like your SPS, they like a lot of light. Like, look at this. That's like a battery of light. Whereas things like your morphs, your corellas, your ricks, your leathers, they don't need anywhere near as much light. And then the other thing is proximity to the light. For example, one of the very best tanks I ever saw was ran off 2 radions. And he had a beautiful, diverse range of corals, but he'd have his SPS in that vicinity. Let's say he had 2 lights, that one and that one. His SPS would be in that vicinity. Then all of his lower light corals would occupy the rest of the tank. So you can consider each coral and how far away from the light it is. So once again, you either get corals that suit the lights that you've got, or you get lights that suit the corals that you want. Question?
Anemones spitting out some chopped down. What would be the ideal food for anemones to eat?
What's the ideal food for anemones? Okay, so basically the ideal food for anemones is obviously have clownfish, because your clownfish are going to produce waste. The anemones are going to get most of their energy from the light, so having decent lights is really important. Then any good quality fish foods are excellent. So basically things like your Denichi is excellent. You can put prawn, you can put any of your frozen foods. They're really not that fussy, and they don't need to be fed that regularly, especially if you don't want them to grow too fast. So purpose feeding the anemone once a week would be fine. And if you've got good clownfish in there, you really don't even have to feed them at all, because the clownfish will do that for you.
Okay, got another anemone question, then I've got a reactor question.
Yep.
Just a bubble tip anemone that's split into 5 over a number of months. Does that affect my waste load? If so, by how much?
Not really. So basically they've got an anemone, it's split into 5. That's super common. And so once again, you don't need to feed the anemone heaps. So it's getting most of its energy from the light. So whether it increases your load is whether you're increasing the amount of food. Because ultimately the load isn't governed by the animals in there. The load is governed by how much you need to feed the animals in there. So therefore, if you've got 5 anemones in the tank and there's a whole bunch of clownfish in a whole bunch of fish in the tank, there's already waste in the tank, and you're giving the anemone a little bit of a feed once a week, they're not really going to increase the load too much. You're really just going to increase the load too much when they go through your power head and then destroy your whole tank.
Do you think biopellet reactor would make a difference, or already have an algae reactor?
Okay, so basically, do you think a biopellet reactor would make a difference if you have a real? So basically, once again, these things are solving problems. So it depends whether you've got the problem. So on this tank, for example, on Callan's tank, we have a Chaeto reactor there, and it's going to be sucking out nitrate and phosphate. And then as the algae grows inside it, you need to be cleaning it out to remove the nutrients that it's collected. But the main advantage of a biopellet reactor is a reduction of nitrates. So if you've got nitrates in your aquarium and you've got a good skimmer and you're cleaning that skimmer twice a week, then a biopellet reactor is a great thing for getting rid of nitrate. But what sucks about biopellet reactors is that every time that your nitrate goes up or down, you've actually got to up or down the amount of biopellets, because the amount of biopellets needs to correspond to the amount of nitrate being produced. So if you have a massive tank with lots of fish, a biopellet reactor is awesome. If you've got a reef tank with not too many fish, I wouldn't bother, because you could just use a dosing pump with something like Nopox on it, which is an organic carbon source as well, which is super easy to regulate. To turn the Nopox up and down, you're just going to have a dosing pump. It's going to boop, boop, and just turn it up or turn it down according to what your nitrate levels are. Whereas your biopellet reactor, you've got to open it up and take some out, and it's a process and it takes time. So basically, you've got a real big tank, biopellet reactor is awesome. If you've got a normal reef tank, the algae reactor is awesome. And once again, it depends what your problem is. If you've got a nitrate issue and it's a huge tank, biopellet reactor is a very economical option. If you've got a nitrate issue and you've got a small tank, therefore it's not going to be as stable, I'd be just sticking with organic carbon with something like Nopox.
Do you have a guide for flow recommendation, wave maker positioning?
Yeah, absolutely. So my go-to, so there's lots of ways of doing it, first of all. So obviously there's no such thing as one way, but the way Luke's tank is set up is my standard way. So I'm usually wanting about 20 times an hour water flow in the fish tank itself. Once again, things like your acroporas, like the higher end of water flow, and then a lot of your more wavy corals, like the lower end of water flow. The minimum I'd ever go for is 10 times an hour, but I'd be really looking at more like 20 times an hour of the flow itself. Now, the other factor is how much water do you put through the filter. So, filter is all about contact time. So, you actually want to get less water going through the filter. Therefore, your skimmer has better contact time, your heater has better contact time, your biopellet reactor, there's your biopellet reactor, has better contact time. So, and also you're not putting the plumbing under stress. If you go and put heaps of water through your filter, not only are you reducing your contact time in the filter, but then you're increasing the noise that the system's going to make because you're going to be pelting the water through all the pipes. So I like, in a perfect world, your tank would turn over through your filter, say 1 or 2 times an hour. So lower flow in your filter and higher flow in your tank. Now the way that I like to position my pumps, and once again, you can do it like Callan's tank, and now assuming you have very powerful pumps, you can go across the tank, but under most circumstances, if you go across the tank, you just blow the crap out of all the corals because you don't want to aim at the corals. So this tank here is my standard setup. It's got an octo pump here aiming up and forward. So got very good surface agitation, which is what I want for my pump. And providing you've got minimal pumps in the tank, then this sort of flow is the easiest way to create kinetic energy. Now with this sort of flow, if you've got really powerful power heads like these gyros, and you can afford countercurrents, then you can do this, but this is creating countercurrents. So you've got one shooting water that way, one shooting water that way, and then they're going against each other, which means that one's blasting into the other one, and the countercurrent will reduce kinetic energy. So that's my standard way, but obviously that's an option. So I'd rather put them on the back. I'd rather aim them forward like Adrian's tank. I want real good surface agitation. I think flow through the back of the Reef is completely overrated because people put pumps in the back of their Reef. They think they're doing a great job, but within a short period of time, they clog up, they don't even work, and the people don't even notice. So I think flow through the bottom is completely overrated. So that's that. Next question.
Okay, there's 2 questions. Fresh seawater better than made up salt water, and vodka dosing.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. So the first question is fresh seawater versus made up salt water. Now, if you use tap water, which contains silicates and other crap, then, and you add salt to it, then the quality of your water is going to just depend on your tap water. And a lot of people have got real crap tap water. So therefore, if you make up salt, a good quality salt, and you use tap water, the whole thing's just going to be crap. If you're lucky and you've got half decent tap water, you can make it up with salt, and it's not going to be too bad. So and then as far as natural seawater is usually pumped out of Sydney, depending on where you live, and that's not the Great Barrier Reef. So in a perfect world, you're going to get RO water, reverse osmosis water, and then you're going to mix up a good quality salt. So good quality salt with RO water is absolutely your best option. Natural salt water has silicates and other crap in it as well, and you're not getting, unless you live in Cairns, you're not getting coral reef water anyway.
What's your thoughts on if you do it this way sometimes and that way sometimes? I always go with stability. So if I'm going to make it, that's how I'm going to look after that tank. Or if I'm going to go natural salt water, I'll go that way, and that's the only thing I'll do. Can you swap them around?
Well, you absolutely can swap them around, but then the results are variable. So if you did RO and high quality salt, then you're always going to have less silicates and less crap going into your water. If you do natural seawater, it is also an option. You can do that, and when you don't have time to mix up RO water or whatever, you can do it. It's just that your results are going to be not quite as good. And then the results are not immediate. So if you go using, say, natural seawater for a while, it's not going to be for a month or 2 months until you start to see just a little bit of deterioration to the tank. So using RO and salt is absolutely the best option. And if you do that consistently, it's absolutely the best option as far as comparing it to mixing it to inferior options. Now, vodka dosing.
Vodka dosing.
So vodka is really good for drinking. It's my go-to drink these days. So since I stopped drinking beer, look at this.
Not flash your stomach.
Oh, I wasn't going to flash my stomach. It was something. I was going to flash something else that was a lot more of a concern. So vodka's really good to drink. And vodka is a carbon source. So let's say that your vodka's so crap that you don't want to drink it, and you don't even want to mix it with soda water, because that's my go-to drink, then you might decide to pour some in your fish tank. And then people will often use a dose of like 1 mil per 1,000 litres, upping it to maybe 1 mil per 500 litres. But that's a carbon source. But what you're really better off using is an actual product which is actually designed to break down nitrate and phosphate. But within these particular products, there's something like, I can't remember, but there's something like 3 different carbons for breaking down nitrate, and then something like 7 different organic carbons for breaking down phosphate. So it isn't just one type of carbon source. So vodka is better than nothing, but I would drink the vodka. I would use Nopox or similar to get your nitrate and phosphate down, but though you can use vodka for your fish tank, or if you drank enough vodka, then your fish tank would suddenly start looking better. Like, yeah, my fish tank looks awesome after 20 vodkas. But then you can drink vodka and you can put vodka in your fish tank, but I don't suggest that Nopox is quite as versatile as that. Nopox is probably better off in your fish tank, not so good to drink.
Arrow water, how long can you keep it in a tank before adding the salt to it?
Okay, RO water is pretty much pure water, so you can keep it for as long as you want, because it shouldn't really make any difference, because there's nothing organic in it. And a lot of people also ask, how long can I keep my salt water? If the salt is mixed up with RO water, really you can keep it for as long as you want. And then if you're using, let's say, natural seawater, then it's best to use it fresh, but the natural seawater is going to have an organic component to it. So therefore, if you just keep it in a bottle that's unaerated, some of the organics is going to die. So therefore, to a small degree, the salt water will deteriorate in its quality. But then if you left it for long enough, the bacteria would then stabilize and it would probably be usable again. You'd want to aerate it first because you might have hydrogen sulfide issues. Yeah, the pH may drop, but
yeah, I've seen that.
You're really better off using the natural seawater straight away if possible. And then if you're mixing it up with RO water, it probably doesn't make too much difference.
4 clowns and 2 nems, but the clowns don't go anywhere near the nems.
Okay, so clownfish don't always go near anemones, especially depending on the species of clownfish. So your Nemo clownfish, if we want to be technical, they're very fussy. So they, very often you'll buy them and they don't want to go anywhere near the anemone. And they're just fussy. They just want certain anemones, and even then they might not. And even the tank bred ones, they may not go near the anemone. And then you've got things like your Premnus and your Phonatus and other types of clownfish. They tend to just go in any anemone. I'd probably be a Premnus, I'd think. Yeah, I wouldn't be as fussy.
Thoughts?
I'd go in anything that looks like an anemone.
I'm going to get bad from here. Thoughts on calc and water changes only? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so calc as in Kalkwasser. So Kalkwasser is an option that's been used forever. But the thing about calcium hydroxide is that it's very, very unstable. So in a perfect world, you drip it in at night time, not use it during the day. But it's not for beginners because it's going to bomb your pH. So your pH will go up real high and your pH will fall really quick. So it is, if you're very experienced and you're a real tight ass, it's an option. But if you're not super experienced and you're not quite chemically competent, I'd stay away from these volatile ones. I'd just stick with well-trusted, good quality, stable products.
Thoughts on sulfur reactors for nitrates?
Okay, sulfur reactors are not something I'm a fan of because sulfur, so sulfide with water, hydrogen sulfide, it's just not my friend. So they do work. They're going to help get your nitrate down, but yeah, I prefer not to use them. So they are an option, but a lot of the tanks that I've been involved with that have got them on, there's various blocks that contain sulfur in them and stuff. I'm not into it. You can use them, but I'd rather use something safer. There's so many safer products on the market that aren't going to increase hydrogen sulfide and other residuals that I'm not a friend of.
You guess who this is from as soon as I tell you. I just bought a monster tank. It's so big I could fit in it my front seat of my Mini. How many dory fish can I keep and how many Nemos?
Awesome. and also nanos are not cool. There's like a fad about nano tanks. Oh, my nanos are not cool. Like, do you know what's cool? Is a big tank where the fish have got lots of room to swim around. That's cool. But a nano tank is like putting a Great Dane in your laundry. You can do it, but it sucks. So nano tanks are last resorts. Nano tanks are quarantine tanks for when you get your big tank. So that's my opinion on nano tanks, just in case you asked, which you didn't.
Let me ask the big tank.
Nano tanks are gay. Next.
John Barrow's giving me the haircut.
Well, yeah, thanks. My haircut's still growing out from when he gave me one.
Yellow tanks will soon be accessible again. Do you think they're coming back? No way.
No, well, everything comes back. Like the word rad. I reckon rad's going to come back. Remember that was like a real popular word?
Yeah,
I reckon rad's going it's going to be rad.
No.
See, the yellow tanks are a big load of crap because it's just like recently I was over in Hawaii, and there's for the last 13 years they've been doing studies into yellow tank natural population numbers, and they've been steadily increasing. So the governments are just looking for low-hanging brownie points. So let's say that the natural resources of this fish was actually under threat, and they were actually pilfering them to the point that their natural populations were decreasing, then I think banning these fish is ecologically responsible. But what they're doing is political. It is not, there's no science to back it up, because for the last 13 years, the natural populations of these fish have been naturally increasing anyway. So if they restrict the collection and they monitor the collection and they collect the fish responsibly, then it's awesome. And basically all that will happen is there'll be a change of government, and the government will then see the revenue that was coming in, and they'll be available again. They've been off before and they came back, and they'll be back. Yellow tangs will come back. There's my prediction. Oh, so we can do this. I forgot we were doing this. Get very distracted there. This was meant to be a really fast overview. Okay, size of the tank we've talked about, lighting we've talked about, filtration we've talked about. So basically you want to look at what media you put in your filter. Now basically there is marine pure, and then there is fake marine pure. So marine pure has had millions of dollars worth of research, and it is the real deal. It has actual proper surface area to volume ratios to break down nitrifying and to grow nitrifying and denitrifying bacteria. All of the other products are based around the research of marine pure, and you can get independent results from Sir Media, and all of the others are not what they claim. So if my advice with filtration is get marine pure, it's the real deal, and all this other fake I wouldn't get. So sump, next thing is we talked about sumps. Sumps are the absolute go. You can put all your gizmos down there. Sure, you can run a tank off a canister filter. Sure, you can use a hang-on, but sumps are absolutely what I'd get. We talked about how to set your sump water level, the on and off levels. We talked about refugium. So refugium just means safe place. Marine pure is a refugium because all your microorganisms will go through it. You can put various algae in your sump, which can act as refugiums. Once again, what we're doing right now is we're just skimming through the previous seminar, which you can see by looking on either Majestic Aquariums on YouTube or Majestic Aquariums on Facebook. We talked about how top-up systems work. We talked about biomedia, which, as I was saying, you buy marine pure. We talked about polyfilter. Now, polyfilter is a wonderful way of removing accumulants and removing things that you don't know are a problem. And we talked about protein skimmers and about how the most important thing about a protein skimmer is how regularly you clean it. We talked about ways of cooling the aquarium. We talked about water quality. Now, water quality is something that basically fish keeping is 50% water quality and 50% nutrients. Now, if you do not test your own aquarium, you're probably not going to have a good aquarium. If you think that you can take a water sample to the shop and they're going to do some free tests for you using crap test kits that are quick to test, then you're not going to have a good tank. You need to have good, reliable test kits, and you need to do it yourself. You need to understand your water quality, because at the end of the day, you've got a bunch of tests, and if your water quality is good, funny enough, your tank goes well. If your water quality is bad, then everyone understands your tank's going to go bad. But then the thing that people just don't seem to get is if your water quality is not quite right, give it time and your tank's going to be not quite right. So JBL are definitely my favourite test kits because they're easy to test, very reliable German test kits. A lot of your test kits on the market are pretty crap. So just get yourself a good test kit. I like the JBLs too because they come in this nice packet that makes me feel like I know what I'm doing. And doing your own test is really, really important. You cannot rely on anyone else when it comes to testing. You've got to do your own tests, otherwise you're not going to have the results you want. We talked about activated carbon, the advantages and disadvantages of that. Salinity we talked about, which is basically when you add new fish, you need to make sure the salinity is on the low side. When you run the tank, you want to make sure that you're running full salinity, being 0.024, 0.025. We've already had a chat about water flow. We've talked about how important surface agitation is for the top of the tank for gas exchange. We had a quick chat about UV sterilizers. Once again, when your tank is very stable and you're not adding new fish, you do not need a UV sterilizer. If you're going to have a whole lot of money's worth of fish, a UV sterilizer is a great thing for killing your pathogen spores. Once again, this is supposed to be a recap. We've talked about the advantages and disadvantages of live rock. Once again, I'm a live rock person. Live rock is the real deal. If you're super unlucky, you can get pests, which hydrogen sulfide can fix. Hydrogen peroxide, sorry. So we talked about aquascaping tips. We talked about algae. And basically what we're saying about algae is that algae is not a problem. Algae is telling you about a problem. So we talked about coralline algae. Basically, at the end of the day, if your tank's growing good coralline algae, that's a really good source, a really good sign. We talked about sourcing your fish. So where you buy your fish and where the people buy the fish that you buy your fish from is make or break. Because if you buy your fish from some dude that's caught it on a canoe, chucked it in a 10-litre bucket with 40 other fish, rode it on a push bike. Anyway, it's unbelievable, the chain of command, compared to buying it from an importer like Cairns Marine, which is every step of the way is world class. So what fish you're sourcing is so important. We talked about selecting fish, what fish should you be buying for the tank. We've talked a bit about fish population. Now, if you don't have enough fish in the tank, sometimes the fish fret. So you want to have enough fish to make sure the fish are comfortable, because the presence of the other fish help the fish to feel safe a lot of the time. And we talked about grouping fish, when to add the fish. So any clownfish you want, they've got to go in at the same time. Any tangs you want, they've got to go in at the same time. Any angels you want, they have to go in at the same time. We talked about acclimatizing your fish. We've talked about the importance of quarantine. Now, you're going to learn this lesson. Get a quarantine tank, or you're going to wish that you got a quarantine tank. Because see, the main issue with a quarantine is that you get, when the collectors, they catch the fish, they catch them out of 0.025, 0.026, whatever the environment is, and then they throw them straight into 1.7, 1.6, because fish can handle going down. It eases osmotic pressure. It allows more energy for the immune system. It reduces how much the osmoregulation system has to work, which is the balance of salt within the fish and the environment. But the fish can't go back. They got to go back really slow. So if you want to do one good thing for your tank, particularly if you've got money's worth of fish, is get yourself a quarantine tank. The quarantine tank has to be big enough for the fish to feel comfortable in. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be like a tub. It just needs a heater and a filter that's going to give it some surface agitation and a bit of biomedia. It doesn't have to be hard. You put the fish in there for a month and you start with a nice low salinity like 1.8. And then once the fish are happy and the fish are settled in, they've got low osmotic pressure, the pathogens hate the fresh water. Then when the fish stabilize and they start feeding and they start looking good, then you can slowly start raising the salinity. Then when you get about a month down the track, the fish are feeding well, the fish are happy, you can see that they're well adjusted. Then you make sure that salt level, pH and temperature is exactly the same in the quarantine as the main tank. Then you just catch them out and put them straight in the main tank. The quarantine is the absolute best way that you're going to reduce parasitic infection and so forth. Otherwise, if you go and buy your fish from the shop, put them straight in your tank, you are playing Russian roulette, because the natural environment is full salinity. The importers tend to have very low salinity. Then the aquarium shops tend to have sort of in the middle salinity. Then if it jumps up to full salinity, all of the good that has been achieved by putting the fish into the low salt is suddenly undone by you putting them into high salt, because the salinity of a fish is about half seawater. So therefore, if you put the fish into lower salt, the osmoregulation system, which uses a lot of energy, doesn't have to work hard. And if that doesn't have to work hard, that energy is available for the respiration system, for the immune system, for everything else, and the parasites hate it. So you put the fish into the low salt, you settle the fish in, you slowly raise the fish up. Once you've monitored the fish for a month, you've seen their feeding, you've seen they're happy with them, that you're happy with them, you've got the levels right, you put them in the main tank, and it makes so much difference.
Okay, got a couple of questions. It's
Question time.
8:15. AI prime lights, can they grow SPS successfully?
Okay, AI prime lights are awesome lights. And it is all about the proximity to the light. So absolutely and totally, yes, they can grow SPS. But once again, it depends which AI prime you're talking about. Because if you're talking about one of these big fellas, then this will grow SPS in that tank. It's so powerful. But if you're talking about a AI prime, a prime, for example, which is the little one, that will also beautifully grow SPS, but in the proximity of the light. So if you think, all right, well, that's where the light's thrown, that's where you can put your SPS. But if you have a prime on a big tank, you can't go putting the SPS necessarily too far away from the light. So I am a very big AI fan. So they're an absolute go-to light, and yes, they absolutely grow SPS.
Can you clean polyfilter, and what's the best way to clean it for reusing it?
Okay, so you can clean it. So the easiest way to clean it is just hit it with a hose. It doesn't really do much, but you can do it. I wouldn't bother.
Why would you hit it with a hose?
Because you might knock a bit of crap off it.
But wouldn't you feel biological?
Polyfilter's not biological. So I wouldn't bother. And then there's recharge instructions on it. But I think it's more hassle than I see the benefit of. So if I was you, the way I'd run my polyfilter is normally it's going to be in a sump or something. And in a perfect world, I'll have a bit of filter wool on the top. And filter wool's not filter wool too. Some filter wools are way better than others. You can just go and get some air conditioning wool. It'll trap some crap and work. But other filter wools are much better. Like the amount of crap this pulls out of the water compared to standard air conditioning filter wool is phenomenal. You tell that when you pick it up at the end. So if you got something like that and you put that first, and then you put some old polyfilter, and then you put new polyfilter underneath. So the water goes down, most of the crap gets caught out by that. Then you get the older polyfilter, because you'll find that polyfilter works best when it's new. And then after about a month, I think it deteriorates how well it works. And then after about 3 months, it still works, but I think its efficiency is really quite low. So in a perfect world, I'd have a good quality filter wool on top to catch all the main crap. Then I'd have my old polyfilter next, just to try and use it, because a lot of people throw out polyfilter when it's still brown. You can chuck it out when it's black if you want to milk it. And then I put the real fresh, nice polyfilter at the bottom. Next question.
Okay, how many fish do you put 500 litres?
So in a 500 litre tank, it really depends on how much maintenance you're prepared to do. So in a 500 litre tank, so that's basically, I'd say, a little bit bigger than this one. If you don't want to do a lot of maintenance, I would say a maximum of 8 fish about that big would be the most I'd put in it. If you're prepared to do more water changes and check your water more, you could put 30 fish in there if you wanted to, but you're going to have to do more maintenance. So in a 500 litre tank with minimal maintenance, I'd say 8 fish. And once again, it all depends on the size of the fish, because Eric Borneman says, according to his actual studies into actual fish bioload, his exact words in a seminar that I once went to was, if you have a fish in this hand, I don't know what he's doing with fish in his hands. If you have a fish in your hand that weighs 1 kilogram, it has 20 times the load of 20 fish that add up to 1 kilogram. So it's a disproportionate amount of inefficiency. Small fish are far more efficient with their nutrients than big fish. So a big fish is equal to 20 times 20 of the small fish. So that's the first point. The other point is, what do you feed the fish? So basically the food, which is by far the most economical food as far as clean is concerned, is this. This is Spectrum's probiotics. Not only is it one of the highest quality foods you can get, but it also contains the probiotic. Now the probiotic is very good for the fish's digestion, but the thing that's most amazing about this stuff is that when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo eats the poo. You will not believe it until you see it. It really works well. And that, coupled up with, say, a super high quality food like Danichi, would be my preference. So my go-to foods would be your New Life Spectrum probiotics as my main food, and then my Danichi as my fish polishing food. Obviously you can get frozen foods. They're nowhere near as clean, but they're a nice treat. And that's a real nice looking freezer. Look at it, looks good, doesn't it? So if you want to get some frozen foods, that's a nice little treat for the fish. But the main food I'd be looking at would be your Danichi, because most fish food is processed crap in a can. So how clean your tank is and how many fish you can keep is governed by what you feed the fish.
The question is, you can see the bacteria eating the food? Question mark, question mark.
Oh, of course I can. Because I'm like Superman. I can see straight through dresses. I can see bacteria.
You wish.
I can, you would. Yeah, you know I can.
Alright, okay, so next question is, when I look into the tank from the side, why is the main front got like a film on the glass and it's not clear?
Okay, so depending on what the film color is, so that's really common. So if you're looking down the side of the tank, it's really common that the glass is not super clear. Now, Callan's glass is pretty clear, but if there's a light brown to it, that just might mean there's diatom on it. And if there's like a bit of a white milky on it, it could be the residual of, say, phosphate remover, which will create a little bit of a residual white. Or it could be overdosing things like your carbon. So maybe you're using too much Nopox, or you've got too much biopellets. So if you're looking through your glass, and I'm assuming it's not like scratched with tiny scratches or something like that, then I would be looking at either nitrate remover, phosphate remover, overdoses of them. Otherwise, it could just be algae. Maybe you're just too lazy to clean it.
Yeah. I found cleaning it though versus blading it makes a difference. Like if you blade it, it comes off, but it comes back quicker. But if I clean it with like, polyfilter or something, I find that it slows that right down.
But that's a super valid point, because if you go and get a razor blade and just clean the algae off, essentially the algae is still in the tank. Yeah. So it's either going to re-stick back on because it's a unicellular algae, or it's just going to find somewhere it's going to die off, it's going to release its phosphates and nitrates and so forth and just cause the growth of more algae. So the other thing that you can do is you can use something like polyfilter that's going to clean the particles, and you can use that for cleaning the glass. Then you'll find that when you clean the glass and you pull the polyfilter out, the algae is on the polyfilter. So therefore you're actually removing the algae out of the aquarium, and if you do remove it out of the aquarium, then you're not allowing it to just regrow. So that's a super good point.
Aptasia remedies.
Okay, so Aptasia remedies. There are lots of Aptasia remedies. The world's best Aptasia remedy is basically this. Now, this shark tank was absolutely full of Aptasia. I mean, the plants were not green. They were Aptasia. The back glass was Aptasia. Now, see this little dude here? I love him. Oh, I love you. Hello. See here? This is a stripey. I love stripies. They look so nice. And they eat all the Aptasia. Look at him. Where's some Aptasia? I want to eat it. So a stripey is the best Aptasia remedy. Just get yourself a stripey, put it in there. It'll eat all the Aptasia. Well, if you can't get stripies, you can have you can get then peppermint shrimp are quite good. Then there's lots of other products you can try, including hydrogen peroxide. So if you go on my YouTube channel, Majestic Aquariums TV, and you go and look at Aptasia, there's lots of different Aptasia products you can see. And if you do want to use hydrogen peroxide, there's lots of information about advantages and disadvantages for that. But in a perfect world, beg, steal, or borrow a stripey.
Stripies love acorns, like you've been told.
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah, they can, and they can. I've seen them not eat them too. Mm-hmm. So it just depends on the individual. And often you just put it in there, you let it eat all the Aptasia, and then in a perfect world, maybe get it out before it starts looking for something else to nibble on. And once again, it depends on the individual, because I've had individuals that do start looking for something else to nibble on, and then I've had individuals that are actually pretty good.
Carbon, would you use it 24/7?
No, I would definitely.
In a reactor.
I don't use carbon 24/7 because carbon is an indiscriminate scrubber. It's going to remove everything from the water. Scrubber.
Yeah.
Scrubber. So then, yeah. So no. If you want to, use it every now and then. Just give the water a bit of a polish. I would not use it all the time. She laughed at polish too. Yeah. Give it a polish.
Get away. All right, now almost 8:30. What do you want to do? We go.
Oh, okay. So we're going to wrap up soon because we don't want to make this too long. And it was meant to be a question and answer. So let's just see where we got up to. Okay, so grouping of fish. We've got to do this fast. And we talked about there's heaps of information on feeding. So once again, if you email me, paul@majesticaquariums.com.au, I will send you this. And this is all my notes. Now, phosphate. Talk all about phosphate. Phosphate's pretty easy to solve these days. Talked about dosing. Talked about carbon dosing. Talked about water changes. Talked about synthetic versus real salt. Talked about salinity. Talked about the 1 month rule. The 1 month rule is super important. When you add fish, do not add more fish for a month. There's a lot of information on white spot. Corals. Now, some corals are easy to keep. Some corals are hard to keep. The positioning of the coral is something you need to be very aware of. Grouping the corals is something you must be very aware of. How corals sting each other, which ones sting each other. Understanding why a coral colour, coral mucus, why corals bleach. Information on anemones. We also talk about if you want your tank to look totally crap, and if you want it to look unfinished, like some stupid science experiment, then you could consider a bare bottom tank. If not, if you want it to look good, you could put sand in it. We talk about cleanup crews, various things to do if you are in an emergency. We talk about Murphy's Law. Murphy is a bastard. How important it is to clean your impellers and your pump every now and then. Servicing the aquarium. Now, if you have a reef tank, no one else can look after it. If you have someone come every week, then maybe you can have someone else look after it. But don't ever be under the illusion that you're going to get a reef tank and have someone come once a month and look after it. It's not. You need to be involved in it yourself. This is a hobby. This is something for you to learn about. If you want to set the tank up and look and play with it when it suits you, get a cichlid tank. Cichlids are awesome. They've got heaps of personality and they're colourful and they're really beautiful. Look at them. Oh, hello. They're great. Get yourself a cichlid tank. They're awesome fish. Servicing we talked about. Now, talk about the advantages of having lids on the tank versus how cool it looks without lids. Understanding biological lag. So biological lag means that whatever you do today, you wait, say 3 weeks for it to actually show up. Well, where did I get up to? Servicing, biological lag, evaporation, tips for holidays, what happens if your power goes out. Now, the other thing that I'll talk about is the Great Barrier Reef is not dying.
I've got a question. Can you bring a bleached coral back to life?
Okay, so if the coral has been bleached for a short period of time, for example, let's say that the Great Barrier Reef has had a few hot days and the coral has bleached, that does not mean it's dead. If the water stays hot for long enough, it might die. But half the time it just bleaches. And it bleaches to save itself so it doesn't over photosynthesize. Then when the temperature goes down, what normally happens is the coral then takes on its zooxanthellae again, and most of it survives. So when the Great Barrier Reef experiences bleaching events, the news networks go nuts, and they publish everywhere. Oh, the Great Barrier Reef's dying, and they get all this footage of white coral everywhere. Now, what they don't do is go back there in 6 months and show you that that same reef that they showed you, which was completely dead, is now looking fine again. The coral reef is the most fertile and productive ecosystem in the world. Now, we have to do everything we can to save it, and everything we can do there's so much that we can do to make sure it's safe, but it isn't dead. It is not too late. And all this press that it's dying is just stupid. Dead. Sorry, it's not that it's dead. It has stress. What's that?
AIMS don't think like you do.
Yeah, I know, but they want funding. So, I mean, I've sat around dinners with some of the actual scientists that are telling you this. Now, there's so many stresses that the Great Barrier Reef has, and there's so much that we can do to make it thrive, but it's not dead. So, and these scientists that are saying it's dead, what they want is funding. So this is absolutely, we need to do every single thing we can to keep that Great Barrier Reef as healthy and as vibrant as possible. But to go around saying it's dead is absolutely ridiculous. And then media don't want to know that 6 months later that reef looks good again. So we need to do every single thing we can with the belief that the coral reef has been there for millions of years, and it's gone through all sorts of changes. It's shrunk, it's moved, it's grown, and then chances are when we're gone, the Great Barrier Reef will still be there. and it will move, it'll change, it'll shrink, it'll grow, but it isn't dead.
What about bleaching in aquariums?
So once again, bleaching in aquariums is all relative to how long it's under stress for. So if it is in a hot environment for long enough, the bleaching can kill the coral. If the environment, if you're able to save it, fix your chiller, whatever you need to do, it can take its zooxanthellae back on, and then it can survive. But basically, if you're getting bleaching, you need a better chiller. Any more questions? Cool. Alrighty, so if you want any more information on anything we talked about, then make sure you check out our YouTube channel, Majestic Aquariums TV. And as far as the Reef aquarium is concerned, the most important thing is that you get the right equipment for what you want to do. And if you go keeping super hard to keep corals, then you really want to be a very experienced keeper. And you really want to start with easy to keep corals and easy to keep fish. So once again, here at Majestic Aquariums, all of our corals are, or all of our fish particularly, is a little number next to them. Number 1 means it's very easy to keep. They're the ones you want to go for. You can propagate them, you can keep them. They're much more forgiving. If you're very experienced, then you can start looking at number 2s. And if you're super experienced and you're ready to take a risk, only then would you go for the number 3s. Now, someone said, what's my favorite fish? That's a really easy one. There it is right there. So Majestic Aquariums was named after my favorite fish, and I came up with Majestic Aquariums when I was 12. And my plan was to become a rock star. And then instead of spending all my money on drugs, I was going to start an aquarium shop. But now I'm thinking I'm glad that I never become a rock star. Plan B.
You are a rock star. What are you
Plan B ended up being a healthier option for me, I think. All right, well, anyway, thank you very much for coming along and watching. Feel free to share. Feel free to watch the previous videos. So once again, you can see the previous ones, because today was really just a roundup. So if you want to watch part 1, part 2, part 3, part 3.5, then they're all available. And if you can't find the links, feel free to shoot us an email, paul@majesticaquariums.com.au. Yep. And once again, if you send me the email, I will send you my notes. And once again, the notes are going to cover all the topics that we went through, and it's going to show you the videos that I would suggest that you watch on each of those topics.
Cool. That's it. Nice. Just showing the other way. Not that bright, are you?
No. Oh well. Okay.
All right. All good.
Thank you.
All right.